Good morning. Today's Friday, day before we read the Torah portion of Toldos, and the entire Toldos is really devoted to the saga of Yitzchak and Rivka, Isaac and Rebekah's twins, who are Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau, two civilizations who grow up. Jacob is the ancestor of the Jewish people, and Esau is seen as the ancestor, really, of Rome and Western civilization. But before that, it goes on in the future, in their actual lives as they grew up, Yaakov is described as a very wholesome person, dedicated to study and spiritual pursuits and higher concepts. And Esau is described as a man of the field, a hunter. And a hunter is really somewhat of a euphemism for really he was a shedder of blood, not just hunting animals for food, but hunting people. And it begins, and it says, tells us that these are the chronicles of the family of Isaac, and because it's going to talk about the twins who were born. And Rashi, the primary commentary on the Torah, writes on that when it says the chronicles of Isaac, it says Yaakov and Esav, who are spoken about here in the Torah. Rashi defines it. And I remember the Rabbi once noting that at a Shabbos Farbrengen of this Torah portion, saying, what's Rashi telling us? Just it's these are the chronicles, and you read, you'll find out right away. Why is he? What's? He's not. There's no question that should be coming up to a person reading and saying, what are the chronicles? We're going to find out what the chronicles are, and it doesn't take very long, only a few verses to start spelling it out. Why does Rashi give us something of a punchline? The end of the story when before it starts, saying these are the chronicles. Oh, it's talking about Yaakov and Esav, who are described here in the Torah. And I remember that they're very emotionally saying, how is it that someone who lived a life like Esav, a murderer, a rapist, a person who did such damage to society, how does and there was a child who studied this last year, and they come and say, these are the chronicles of Yitzchak and Rivka? You're talking about Esav? That we're saying that this is their offspring, this is what they created? And Rabbi was very emotional, and he said that when we look at human beings, certainly when we look at children, when we see their behaviors, they have to be addressed. And we have to try to help them correct behaviors that need correcting. But even when the behaviors are off, are wrong, maybe even evil, the person beneath the behaviors has a purity to them, and we have to try to have them access it. There's an evildoer, and we talk about the actions as evil. The person, you always have to remember they're also a child of God. And even if we're punishing them, and even if we are as a society or as a Torah society dealing with their behaviors, this is a person with potential for good, who abused the potential, who went off, who did not, who has hurt their own lives and people around them. But essentially, they are a child of God. And even as we're addressing their behaviors, to remember that this is not a piece of human debris, but this is a divine creation. So when Rashi is launching this Torah portion and talking about the progeny of Yitzchak and Rivka, and we're going to find out soon, we may remember from last year, one of them is really not a good guy. he's pointing out to us, Rashi is pointing out to us, is that he says, Yaakov and Esav, as they appear in the Torah. As they appear in the Torah, in their pristine state, they both had good potential for the world. Their essential meaning is there, and they both could have been totally productive and positive forces in the world. Esav did not choose that. But at this point, we say these are the chronicles, the progeny of Yitzchak and Rivka, who they gave birth to, were two potentially wonderful gifts to the world. It'll play out, and one of those gifts chooses not to be such a gift. But at this point, when we talk about Yitzchak and Rivka, and really pre-Esav living a life that he should not have, we say the chronicles, the true progeny of Yitzchak and Rivka is Yaakov and Esav as they appear in their potential. The idea is, and one of the great lessons of this Torah portion is, that we live in a world where people do have choice to do things that they shouldn't do, and we need to address it, and we can't make excuses for it, and we can't just roll over. We have to remember that that person too, as we're addressing it, that person too is a brother or a sister. That person too is a creation of God. And that foundation of respect for humanity has to be without any compromise, even as we go about dealing with behaviors that need to be addressed. I guess as we come into Shabbos, Shabbos is a time for psycho-spiritual clarity. The Shabbos candles give us that mental clarity. They represent the mental clarity. It's being able to look at a world that is harsh, and it's sometimes where we have to watch our back or demand justice and implement justice. But see with the clarity that the people we are talking about are ultimately creations of God, like every one of us. Ultimately, we're all in this together.